Hey, welcome back. Tonight we're going to talk about something that I think a lot of us will agree that needs a little bit more of discussion and possibly, not possibly, it really needs change, and that is the Supreme Court. Supreme Court, I think some of the main problems that it has today has to do with ethical failures. You have, I think, the biggest one that's been shown up in the previous years. It's Clarence Thomas taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from multimillionaire. And that hasn't really changed or done anything to him. And it looks like a fault. It is a fault, but there's no consequences for him. The other part is has to do with age. Young people see that the Supreme Court people are simply too old, that they're making decisions that are going to affect their lives for the next 50 or 60 years, that they are too far apart from what they understand their life is, that the Supreme Court justices' lived experiences do not reflect the lived experiences of young people today. We have had in less than 30 years, in less than 20 years, basically two big technological changes that that those are the kind of things that didn't used to happen 100 years ago. Things were pretty much the same. Live experience, one way or the other, were the same for everyone, but they're not so today. A lot of changes happening and going, and people think that they are too far away from what they understand. Those decisions, the Supreme Court has taken decisions that have been bad. With the way that knowledge is spread today, that really is known really fast. Two examples. An old example is the separate but equal, in which the Supreme Court said, yeah, the black people, they have the same rights of everyone else, but they're on their side, ours, and the white people on their own side. And that way they say that that was some kind of equality. But equality is not equality if you're not equal. If all of a sudden you're equal, but you're there, and you're equal, but I'm here, that's not equality. That was a terrible decision by the court. Now, the other one, not too long ago, Citizens United, in which the court decided that corporations have a voice. They have First Amendment rights of freedom of expression. And they said, money is expression. A corporation can express whatever they want because they have a first right. They have that freedom of expression right. And that is, again, a terrible decision. It's terrible because putting a lot of money into politics, twisting politics by a couple of multimillionaires. Those are the kind of things that got people pissed. They got me pissed. Not only people got me pissed. That corporations all of a sudden are people. That is a terrible decision on the court put there, and that will affect everyone for a good chunk of time. For a good chunk, because in that portion, that was a decision that Congress cannot take an action. The court decided the Citizens United was a constitutionality case. It is a constitutional right that corporations have to give money in such a wasteful, not a wasteful, but in such a way that destroys everyone else's lives. Congress can't do anything because unless they change the Constitution to say freedom of expression doesn't apply to corporations because corporations are not people. Well, unless they say that, that's not going to happen. So what has happened? Hawaii decided that because corporations are state entities, they are created by state power. At our level, we are taking away the power of corporations to have that right. Corporations can only exist with the rights that we give them at the state level, and that's how Hawaii is fighting that part of the fight, that part of the problem. Supreme Court or all of the courts still have an important part to play. In the end, legislature is in charge of setting up the laws that we have and is in charge of the money that we have. The executive is in charge of administering government, of putting those laws into effect. And the court is there to be the last word of law interpretation and the Constitution's interpretation. And that way, the power is not concentrated. I think that was a good idea. That continues to be a good idea. But we need to, kind of better the way that the court, especially the Supreme Court, has worked in the last few times. It has a poor selection process. The judges are nominated by the president in a political process. They are supposed to have some kind, they're having some vetting by the legislature. But again, once the president and the legislator are, the same, they are going to go through with whatever they have. So all of these things that the judge go when they are being they're in the selection processes, the judges, or the prospective judges, will say, we are nonpartisan, we are here for the law. But again, that's not true. There's a reason you were picked, and you were picked because in the end you're a person making an interpretation based on whatever bent you have. You're reading the Constitution, you're reading the laws, not only in a certain way, but in a way that bends to whatever you want. That's how you got, Citizens United. That's how you got the separate but equal. Yes, you should have not decided that way, because that was not the best reading of the law. It was the bent that you wanted. That's simply what it was. So, if I were president, I will change a couple of these things to address the issue of the Supreme Court being partisan, having a weird selection process, and but also having term limits. So the first one, simply, the term limits will be 70 years. And that will be simply because 70 years, it's nothing more than the Social Security maximum age. So if we have made the selection and that's the maximum age of the Social Security level, then that should be the selection. But also, in terms of court numbers, one of those interesting places, as I was looking for, how many justices are in the Supreme Courts around the world. Brazil is out there, and Brazil has an interesting view on the age of their justices. So to be a justice in Brazil, you have to be over 35 and less than 65 years old, with a maximum age. You have to do a mandatory retirement at 70 years. So they're doing it 70 for whatever reason, but it also match the Social Security maximum age. So at that age, you can simply, you're done. But only, I would not put that out for just the justices. I would say that's the same for the president. That would be the same for legislature. Simple and easy. 70 years, you are a little bit too out of it. You just need to go. They could say that the legislators could say that they go and talk to people, that they're always trying to figure out. But that's, again, we see that today. That's not true. There have been a lot of different technological advances that had happened in the last 25 years that these people are simply too out of. And the age shows. Just look at what happened to Biden in the debate. Didn't look good. So Trump, I don't know if that's personality or if there's something that is already, showing his age. So once we need people to start guiding us, administering our laws, and guiding the country, we need to have someone that really is there. And we have simply seen that that's not the best. Having a no maximum age is not giving us a good way of working. And the number of judges out there. So Brazil Supreme Court is made out of 11. Germany is out of 9. Canada is out of 9. It also has 9. Mexico has 9. United Kingdom has 12. Spain has 11. But then Peru has 20. Costa Rica has 22. But they also have quorum out of 15. And Japan also has 15 ones. Now, the European Union, they have 4 different numbers. The maximum is 27, then 15, then 5, and then 3. Pretty much 27 is the number of countries that are there in the European Union. So they get one justice per country. But you don't need all of them to see all the cases that are presented. Most of the cases are done by the 3 panel or the 5 panel. Pretty much 45% and 40% are seen by these 3 and 2. And 10% are seen by the 15 justices panel, and only 5% is seen by the full court of 27. So numbers are change all out there. We have we have had, I think it's 6 to 11, 12 at some point, and there's no set number. So what is a good number? Because I really don't have a way of figuring out what is a good number. The federal government usually breaks the states in 10 different regions. So I will say that having 10, not because we're selecting a justice from each region, but simply because they have divided the country in 10, I will match it just to that. A number, someone's picking a number out of a box. That's the number I'm picking out of a box. I would not say 10, I would say 11, simply to have an odd number that will help to break any tie that is out there. That won't always be possible, in case there's recusals, but still, for the most part, that's how it works. Mm, so that's, for the most part, that's how it could work. So I would say 11 justices. And my thing about selecting justices is that I come back to something that I learned in school at some point at university. My social studies professor once put us this kind of a thought experiment about selecting someone, about selecting people. It was about selecting people in a way that you will be taking bias out. Will be the fairest way to select someone. And we came up with all these different things, and in the end, he said, "So all of these are preconditioned." Okay, I never asked about. I said the first, and the first in this way was simply lottery. You just pick one here, one there, and one there, and there was nothing. All of these preconditions that were kind of coming, they all have their shortfalls. We all got into a whole lot of discussion about what we were looking. He gave us an example. He gave us a scenario, and when then we had to pick certain things. And as we were discussing, we figured out that what was important for our person was not important for the other one, not important for the other one, and that caused a lot of angst amongst the group. So a lottery was the best thing, and I would say the same thing here. I would say that Supreme Court justices have to really understand how to do the job of a judge. So I would say that we'll need to pick Supreme Court justices from the existing pool of federal judges. Those judges need to have at least 15 years on the bench. And they also need to be less than 67 and a half, because that is just short. That is the other age that the Social Security uses. So I would say if you are at that age of the Social Security, sure, but then you go to a maximum of 70. So you have a short time as a Supreme Court justice. And each Supreme Court justice will only be in the bench for 10 years. And I have reasons for this. This I did not pick at random. So 15 years, really understanding and dealing with, administering justice. That's why you'll be doing work at the highest level, really touching people's lives at that level. So having good experience, it's also important. You can put your name for the ballot, but only if you're in good standing. And this goes in Colorado. The judges are also done by election. When the judges put out by election, there is some kind of state entity that evaluates judges, and they see how is it that they work, and they have some kind of small report about whether a judge there is doing appropriate work, and something similar to say that the judge is working, is doing it right. It's just doing the right work. That way you don't pick some of these justices have some kind of troubles. That's also one of the troubles with the court itself, is that it's sometimes fails to manage its judges properly, to do proper employee management. So as long as they have a passing grade, or as long as they're fit for the work, they can put their name forward, and then we can pick them. After the 10 years, they don't go out into the wild. They can come back to one of the two other different court systems: the appellate or just the first line of judges. They get their pick. They can go whatever it is that they want, and they can be there, and they're done their term. I think the justices will be able to understand why this limit is important, why only giving 10 years, because in the end, power corrupts, and living in a position for life of that position of power corrupts. And we're seeing it today. People really keep their job past the time that they're fit for their work, because power corrupts. They really love having it. They don't want to lose it, no matter how much you like it. No matter anything you think about the judge, in the end, loving the job, staying there past the time they're supposed to be there, it's not a good idea. Coming back to the court that they want also prevents them from having some kind of favorable decision for some kind of company, and then they will come, they will finish their stint as a Supreme Court justice and go into their board and go into this cushy job. And that it's a way to prevent that kind of incentive for a justice to not do the right work. So those are the kind of things that I will like to limit in a judge. And then the last thing I will add to it's a ethics code. And seeing what has happened with the gifting of money of hundreds of thousands of dollars is not something that should be commonly seen, something that should not be permitted. Justices, but the courts in general have all the kind of problems. There's been reporting about bad behavior from judges, and really no consequences to them. So a binding code of ethics that could be managed not by the judges themselves, because it seems like they can't manage these things themselves. Look at the problems that they have, and they still have it. Those judges are still there, but some kind of separate entity that is still within the court system, something like an inspector general, like every other agency has, that will address those kind of things and will keep the judges in check. And those are my possible solutions to the Supreme Court problem. Enjoy.